My father-in-law slapped me at a baby shower and called me defective, not knowing I was 11 weeks pregnant with his grandchild. My father-in-law slapped me at a baby shower and called me defective, not knowing I was 11 weeks pregnant with his grandchild. The sound didn't feel real at first. What I remember most wasn't the impact. It was the silence afterward. 20 people stopped talking at once, like someone had pressed pause on the entire room. Laughter died mid-breath. A balloon brushed softly against the ceiling. Somewhere behind me, a gift bag crinkled as it slipped from someone's hands. I stood frozen in the middle of Olivia Grant's living room on Willow Creek Drive, my cheek burning, a paper plate sliding from my fingers onto the carpet. Deviled eggs scattered across pastel decorations meant to celebrate new life. And inside me, hidden beneath a loose blue dress, was a life no one there knew about. 11 weeks. Let me go back a little, because disasters never feel sudden when you replay them later. They build quietly, piece by piece, until one moment breaks everything. My husband, Ethan, and I arrived just after 2 that afternoon. Early autumn sunlight warmed the quiet suburb outside Raleigh, North Carolina. Olivia, Ethan's younger sister, sat surrounded by pink wrapping paper, 7 months pregnant and exhausted, but smiling for photos while her husband, Caleb, recorded every moment like it was a reality show. Everything looked normal. If you didn't know Victor Hayes. Victor, my father-in-law, had spent 30 years running a logistics company, and retirement hadn't softened him. He treated conversations like commands and disagreements like personal attacks. Family gatherings followed invisible rules everyone understood without speaking. Don't challenge Victor. Don't embarrass Victor. And above all, don't contradict him in public. He stood near the patio door when we arrived, already holding his 3rd beer, watching people instead of joining them. His eyes landed on me almost immediately. I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. Ethan squeezed my hand. "We'll stay an hour," he whispered. I nodded, pretending confidence I didn't feel. 14 months earlier, I'd lost my first pregnancy at 9 weeks. The grief had hollowed me out so completely that even now, baby showers felt like emotional minefields. Victor never said anything cruel to my face back then. But months later, Ethan admitted his father had told him, "Maybe she just isn't built for motherhood." Built. Like I was defective equipment. So when Victor's voice cut across the room that afternoon, loud enough for everyone to hear, I wasn't surprised. "Still no kids yet, Nora?" he said, raising his beer slightly. "Some women just aren't cut out for it." A few guests laughed awkwardly. Others suddenly became very interested in the snack table. Heat rose behind my eyes, but I kept my voice calm. "Well," I said lightly, "life doesn't always follow someone else's schedule." It wasn't rude. It wasn't loud. But it was the first time I hadn't swallowed the insult. Victor's smile disappeared slowly. He set his drink down, walked toward me. The room shifted. Conversations fading as people sensed tension building. I could smell beer and aftershave when he stopped inches away. "You've had attitude since day 1, he muttered. "Disrespectful." "Please don't talk to me like that," I said quietly. That was enough. His hand moved fast. Impact cracked through the room. My head snapped sideways. The plate fell. Someone gasped. Music continued playing softly from a speaker. An upbeat song completely wrong for the moment. I turned instinctively toward Ethan. He stood near the gift table, frozen, shock locking him in place. No one stepped forward. No one said stop. For a strange second, everything slowed. And my only thought wasn't anger or humiliation. It was fear. Because beneath my dress, my hand instinctively pressed against my stomach. Stay safe. If you've ever had a moment where the world suddenly feels fragile, where one decision changes everything, you know how sharply time slows down. Later, people will argue about details. Who said what? Who moved first? But in that moment, all I knew was this. I was standing alone in a crowded room, and the cramping started before we even reached the front door. The cramping started as a dull pressure low in my stomach. At first, I tried to ignore it. Shock can trick you into believing your body is reacting to emotion instead of danger. My cheek still burned where Victor's hand had struck me, and the sound of guests whispering behind us followed Ethan and me all the way down the driveway. No one stopped us. No one asked if I was okay. The front door of Olivia's house closed behind us with a soft click that felt louder than the slap itself. Ethan hurried ahead to unlock the car. His hands shook so badly he missed the button twice. "Nora, wait," he said as I reached the passenger side. I didn't know what to do. Another wave of pressure rolled through my abdomen, tighter this time. "Just drive," I whispered. He hesitated. "Maybe we should go back inside and talk." I turned toward him slowly. "Drive now." Something in my voice finally cut through his confusion. He nodded quickly and started the engine. We pulled away from Willow Creek Drive while laughter and pastel decorations disappeared behind us, replaced by quiet suburban streets glowing in late afternoon light. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. I focused on breathing evenly, counting each inhale the way the therapist had once taught me after the miscarriage. In for 4 seconds, out for 4 seconds. But then I felt warmth. My heart skipped. I looked down. A faint pink stain spread across the fabric of my dress. The world narrowed instantly. "No," I murmured. Ethan glanced over. "What?" "Nothing," I said quickly, pressing my hand against my stomach. "Please just get to the hospital." His grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Is something wrong?" "Yes." That single word changed everything. He accelerated, weaving carefully through traffic toward Riverside Medical Center downtown. Outside, people walked dogs, children rode bikes, ordinary life continuing while panic clawed its way up my chest. 14 months earlier, it had begun exactly like this. The same cramping, the same spotting, the same cold terror spreading through my body. Ethan started talking rapidly, words tumbling over each other. "He didn't mean it like that. You know how Dad gets when he drinks. He hit me," I said quietly. Silence filled the car. "I know," Ethan said after a moment. "I'm just saying he lost his temper." I turned my head slowly. "Finish that sentence," I said softly, "and I will open this door at the next light." He stopped talking immediately. The rest of the drive passed in tense quiet, broken only by the sound of turn signals and my uneven breathing. When we finally pulled into the emergency entrance, Ethan jumped out before the car fully stopped, rushing around to help me. I moved carefully, every step deliberate, terrified sudden movement might make things worse. Hospitals always smell the same: antiseptic and worry. Inside, the waiting room buzzed with controlled chaos. A child cried somewhere to the left. A television played muted news above rows of plastic chairs. The intake nurse asked routine questions until I said the words. 11 weeks pregnant, cramping and spotting. Her expression changed instantly. Within minutes, I was in a wheelchair being rushed past the waiting room while Ethan followed close behind, pale and silent. A nurse named Carla covered me with a warm blanket once I was settled into the examination room. I nearly cried at the kindness. It was the first gentle moment since the party. Ethan sat beside the bed, staring at the floor while his phone buzzed repeatedly in his pocket. Dad, Mom, Olivia, Dad again. He ignored them at first. The ultrasound technician entered, dimming the lights as she prepared the machine. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear her instructions. Cold gel touched my skin. Seconds stretched endlessly as she moved the wand slowly, her face carefully neutral. I watched her expression instead of the screen, searching for clues. Waiting, praying. Then suddenly, a rapid rhythmic sound filled the room. Strong, fast, alive. "That," she said gently, smiling, "is your baby's heartbeat." Relief crashed over me so powerfully, tears slipped into my hair before I realized I was crying. The baby was still there, still fighting. But as the sound echoed through the dim room, another realization settled heavily in my chest. Nothing about my life or my marriage would ever be the same after today. The sound of the heartbeat stayed with me long after the ultrasound ended. Fast, steady, determined. I lay back against the hospital pillow, staring at the ceiling while relief slowly replaced panic. My body felt drained, like every ounce of strength had been used just getting through the last hour. Dr. Hannah Mercer entered a few minutes later, tablet in hand and a calm expression that immediately made me nervous. "The baby looks good," she said gently, "but you're experiencing what we call a threatened miscarriage." The words landed heavily. Threatened. Not lost, but not safe either. She explained carefully. Strict rest, no lifting, minimal stress, follow-up appointments. I nodded through everything, clinging to the only part that mattered. The baby still had a heartbeat. When she left, silence settled over the room again. Ethan sat beside me, elbows on his knees, staring at nothing. His phone buzzed, then again, and again. Finally, he stood. "I'm going to step into the hallway for a minute," he said quietly. I didn't respond. The curtain separating the room from the hallway was thin, more symbolic than private. Hospital sounds drifted easily through it. Rolling carts, distant voices, overhead announcements. And then Ethan answered the call. "Dad, calm down," he said immediately. I closed my eyes. I couldn't hear Victor clearly, only the sharp rise and fall of his voice through the phone speaker. "She's fine," Ethan added quickly. "We're at the hospital, but she'll be fine." My stomach tightened. Not what you did was wrong. Not you shouldn't have touched her. Just reassurance. "She didn't mean to disrespect you," Ethan continued after a pause. The words felt like another blow. Disrespect. As if that were the real issue. He paced slowly outside the curtain. "No, nobody called the police. Dad, just relax." Another burst of muffled shouting came through the phone. I know she talked back, but I turned my face toward the wall, something cold spreading through my chest. Talked back. Like I was a child being corrected. When Ethan returned a minute later, he looked exhausted, like someone trying to hold together two worlds that refused to fit. "He just wants everyone to calm down," he said. I stared at him. "Calm down," I repeated. "He didn't mean for it to go that far." I swallowed hard. He hit me. "I know," Ethan said quickly. "I just think maybe tomorrow we can all sit down and—" A sharp cramp cut through my abdomen, stealing my breath. A nurse stepped in briefly to check the monitor while Ethan fell silent, guilt flickering across his face. Neither of us spoke after that. Evening settled outside the hospital windows. The hallway grew quieter as visiting hours ended. I focused on a painting across the room, a small sailboat floating on calm blue water, unrealistically peaceful. My mind replayed the party in fragments. Victor's hand rising, the sound of impact, guests watching, Ethan standing still. Doubt crept in, the way it always does after something traumatic. Maybe I shouldn't have answered him. Maybe I should have ignored the comment. Maybe if I'd just smiled. The thoughts lasted nearly an hour. Then I remembered the word he used, defective. My hand moved instinctively to my stomach. "I'm not overreacting," I whispered. At 10:47 p.m., my phone buzzed on the bedside table. A message from my friend Lila, the coworker who had come with me to the shower. I recorded everything. 41 seconds. Clear video. "Tell me what you want to do." I stared at the message, heart racing. Proof. Not opinions. Not family versions shaped over time. Truth. Across the room, Ethan's phone lit up again. Victor calling once more. Ethan declined it this time, setting the phone face down. But instead of relief, a realization settled over me. This wasn't going to end with apologies and awkward family dinners. Victor Hayes had crossed a line that couldn't simply disappear, and whether Ethan understood it yet or not, our marriage had just entered the hardest moment it would ever face. I barely slept that night. Hospitals never truly rest. Machines beep softly, footsteps echo down hallways, and lights remain dim instead of dark. Enough brightness to remind you that life keeps moving whether you're ready or not. Ethan slept in the chair beside my bed sometime after midnight, his head tilted awkwardly against the wall. I watched him for a long time, searching for comfort in familiarity, but all I felt was distance. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Victor's hand again. By morning, the doctor cleared me to go home with strict instructions. Rest, hydration, no emotional stress. No emotional stress felt almost ironic. The drive back to our house on Briarwood Lane passed in silence. Autumn leaves gathered along sidewalks, neighbors walked dogs, and everything outside looked painfully normal. Inside, nothing felt normal anymore. I lay down on the couch as soon as we got home, blanket pulled over me, one hand resting protectively over my stomach. Ethan moved quietly around the kitchen, making tea he forgot to drink. Neither of us mentioned his father. At 9:08 a.m., my phone rang. Olivia. Relief flickered through me. Maybe she was calling to check on me. Maybe someone understood how serious things had been. I answered. "Hey," I said softly. Her voice came fast, tense. "Nora, what exactly did you say to Dad?" The question didn't make sense at first. "I'm sorry?" He's really upset, she continued. He said you embarrassed him in front of everyone. I sat up slowly, dizziness washing over me. He slapped me, I said carefully. I went to the hospital. I know, but he said you got in his face. The words landed heavier than expected. Her father had hit me at her baby shower, and her first instinct was to investigate my behavior. I didn't get in his face, I replied quietly. A pause followed. Well, he's never done anything like that before, Olivia said. Something must have pushed him. I stared at the wall, trying to process what I was hearing. Pushed him. Not hurt me. Not are you okay. Just justification. I need to rest, I said finally, ending the call before my voice could shake. When Ethan returned from the kitchen, he immediately noticed my expression. What happened? Your sister asked what I did to make him hit me. Ethan froze. He didn't defend her. He didn't argue. But he didn't look surprised either, and somehow that hurt the most. The rest of the morning passed quietly. No call from Victor's wife, no message asking if I was safe, nothing resembling concern. Meanwhile, Ethan's phone continued lighting up across the room. Dad calling, Dad again, Mom, Dad again. He flipped the phone face down. I just need things to cool off, he muttered. Cooling off. Like this was an argument instead of an assault. Around noon, a message arrived from Lila. You should see what he's telling people. A screenshot followed. A family group chat I wasn't part of. Victor's message read, She disrespected me in my own daughter's home. I reacted. Anyone would have. Reacted. The same word again. I felt something shift inside me. Not fear this time, but clarity. The story was already changing. In a few weeks, it would become a misunderstanding. Months later, a joke people avoided discussing. Eventually, maybe even my fault entirely. Unless something stopped it. I opened Lila's earlier message again. 41 seconds, clear video. Proof sitting quietly on my phone. For the first time since leaving the hospital, I understood something clearly. Silence wouldn't protect peace. It would only protect him. I rested my hand over my stomach, feeling the steady reassurance of life continuing inside me. One day, this child would learn what was acceptable by watching the adults around her. And suddenly one question became impossible to ignore. If I stayed quiet now, what would she learn about standing up for herself later? By Sunday evening, the story had already changed shape. It no longer sounded like an assault when it traveled through Ethan's family. It became an argument, then a misunderstanding, and finally something dangerously close to my fault. Lila kept sending screenshots from conversations she wasn't even meant to see. Victor says Nora disrespected him. He says she embarrassed him in front of guests. He says everyone is exaggerating. Each message felt like watching reality slowly rewritten. I sat curled on the couch, doctor's instructions resting beside me, trying to keep my breathing steady. The cramping had eased but hadn't disappeared completely. Every small ache reminded me how fragile everything still was. Across the room, Ethan stared at his phone. He's just trying to calm things down, he said quietly. I looked at him. By lying? Ethan rubbed his face. He doesn't think he's lying. Of course he didn't. Victor Hayes had spent decades shaping conversations until his version became the only version allowed. My phone buzzed again. Another screenshot. This time from a family group chat message. I've done everything for that boy. Put a roof over their heads. And this is how she repays me. I felt my stomach tighten. The house. 3 years earlier, when Ethan and I were short on the down payment, Victor had written a check for $42,000. No contract, no repayment plan. A gift, he'd called it, but it had never felt like one. Ethan read the message too. His shoulders sagged. He's angry, he murmured. He's controlling, I corrected gently. Before Ethan could answer, his phone buzzed again, this time a direct text. He stared at the screen for a long moment before turning it toward me. I want my money back. 60 days. Don't test me. The room felt suddenly smaller. He can't do that, I said immediately. Ethan exhaled slowly. You don't know my dad. I know tax law, I replied. If he filed it as a gift, he can't legally demand repayment. Ethan didn't look relieved. He looked scared. He'll make our lives miserable, he whispered. And that was the moment everything clicked. The money wasn't about finances. It was about obedience. Victor wasn't asking for repayment. He was pulling the leash, expecting Ethan to come back into line. My phone buzzed again. Leela, "You need to watch the video all the way through." I hesitated before pressing play. The recording began across Olivia's living room. Decorations, laughter, casual conversation. Then Victor's voice cutting through everything. Some women just aren't cut out for it. I watched myself standing there unaware of what was coming. Then his hand moved. The sound cracked through the speaker. My body jerked sideways, gasps filled the room, and Ethan stood completely still. I stopped the video halfway through, unable to keep watching. Seeing it felt different from remembering it. Memory leaves room for doubt. Video removes it. Ethan swallowed hard. "I didn't realize it looked like that." "That's because you've spent your whole life learning not to see it," I said softly. He didn't argue. The house fell quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Sometimes people think turning points are loud, shouting, ultimatums, dramatic exits. But real change often begins in quieter moments, when truth becomes impossible to ignore. If you've ever watched something back and suddenly understood a situation differently, you know how unsettling that clarity feels. Ethan stared at the paused frame on my phone, his father frozen mid-swing, and something shifted behind his eyes. Fear was still there, but so was recognition. Outside, evening shadows stretched across the living room floor. Inside, the power Victor had held over our lives for years began to crack. Not because of an argument, but because evidence doesn't negotiate. And for the first time since the baby shower, I realized something important. This wasn't just my fight anymore. Ethan was standing at a crossroads, and soon he would have to decide which side of the line he was willing to live on. Monday morning arrived quietly, almost gently, as if the world had decided not to acknowledge the storm sitting inside our home. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting thin stripes across the kitchen table where I sat with a glass of water and the hospital discharge papers. Strict rest. Avoid stress. I followed every instruction carefully, moving slowly, protecting every step. Across the room, Ethan paced. He hadn't gone to work. Instead, he walked back and forth between the kitchen and living room, phone in hand, reading messages he didn't answer. Victor had called 7 times before noon, his mother twice, Olivia once. Each vibration tightened the air. Finally, Ethan stopped pacing. "He's serious about the money," he said quietly. I looked up. He's serious about control. Ethan didn't argue. He sat across from me, exhaustion weighing down his posture. For the first time since the baby shower, he looked less like a son trying to fix things and more like someone realizing nothing could be fixed the old way. "I grew up like this," he admitted. "Keeping him calm was survival." I softened slightly. I knew confronting Victor wasn't simple for him. Authority had been built into Ethan's life long before I entered it. "But we can't raise a child inside that," I said gently. The words hung in the air. Ethan's eyes lifted slowly. A child? We hadn't spoken directly about the pregnancy since the hospital. The truth had hovered between us, fragile and unspoken. I took a slow breath. "There's something I should have told you sooner," I said. Concern replaced tension instantly. "Is something wrong?" "No," I whispered. "Something's right." I reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. "I'm 11 weeks pregnant." The silence that followed felt enormous. Ethan blinked, confusion turning into realization. "You're serious?" I nodded. Emotion flooded his face all at once. Shock, joy, guilt, fear, each fighting for space. "That night," he said quietly, "when he hit you—" "Yes." He pulled his hand back slowly, pressing it against his forehead. "Oh my God." For several seconds, he didn't move. Then he stood, pacing again, but differently now. Faster, uneven, like something inside him had cracked open. "I just stood there," he muttered. "You were carrying our baby and I did nothing." I didn't answer. He already knew the truth. "I thought if I kept everyone calm, it would pass," he continued. "That's what I've always done." "That worked when it was just you," I said softly. "It doesn't work anymore." He stopped walking. "What are you asking me to do?" The question mattered more than anything else so far. "I'm not asking you to fight him," I said carefully. "I'm asking you to choose us." Ethan stared at me, fear flickering behind his eyes. "I don't know how," he admitted. And for the first time, I believed him completely. Because choosing meant breaking a lifetime of conditioning, loyalty tied to obedience, love tied to approval. My phone buzzed on the table. An unknown number. I opened the message. "You've caused enough drama. Apologize and we can all move on." No name attached. No explanation needed. I set the phone down slowly. "They want this to disappear," I said. Ethan looked at the screen, jaw tightening. "What are you going to do?" I thought about the ultrasound room, the heartbeat, the video saved in 3 different places, and the child who would one day watch how I handled this moment. "I'm done pretending it didn't happen," I said quietly. Ethan studied my face carefully. "What does that mean?" "It means your father doesn't get to decide how this ends." Outside, a car passed slowly down Briarwood Lane, ordinary life continuing as always. Inside our kitchen, though, something irreversible had begun. Because once the truth is spoken out loud, everyone involved has to decide whether they're brave enough to live with it. Tuesday morning felt different, not calmer. Nothing about my life felt calm anymore, but clearer. The fog of shock had lifted, replaced by a steady awareness that waiting for things to fix themselves was no longer an option. I woke before Ethan, the house still quiet in early morning light. For a moment I lay still, one hand resting over my stomach, focusing on the absence of pain. No cramping overnight, no spotting, just exhaustion and a growing sense of resolve. Ethan slept on the couch, phone still clutched loosely in his hand. When the screen lit briefly, Victor's name appeared again among missed calls, stacked one after another. I moved carefully into the kitchen and made tea, following every instruction the doctor had given me. Rest didn't mean helpless, at least not anymore. My laptop sat waiting on the table. I opened it. The search bar blinked back at me. Assault laws, North Carolina. The results were frustratingly ordinary. An open hand strike without visible injury often resulted in minor charges. Cases depended on witnesses, evidence, statements. Translation: incidents like mine disappeared all the time, unless someone documented them. My phone rested beside the keyboard. 41 seconds of undeniable truth. I watched the video again, forcing myself not to look away. Victor's shoulders squared, his hand lifted, the impact clear, unmistakable. No confusion, no misunderstanding, just reality. When Ethan woke, I was already dressed. Comfortable clothes, flat shoes, nothing that violated doctor's orders, but ready. He frowned immediately. "Where are you going?" "I need to take care of something." "Nora," he said carefully, "you're supposed to be resting." "I am," I replied gently, "but this matters." Understanding slowly crossed his face. "You're not going to—" "I am." He sat up fully. "If you do this, there's no undoing it." I met his eyes steadily. "There already isn't." The drive to the Raleigh Police Department felt surreal. Morning traffic moved normally around me while my thoughts stayed sharply focused. I expected fear, shaking hands, second thoughts. Instead, I felt calm. Inside, the building smelled faintly of coffee and paperwork. A young officer at the front desk looked up as I approached. "How can I help you?" I swallowed once. "I need to file a report." 20 minutes later, I sat across from Officer Megan Alvarez in a small interview room. She listened without interruption while I described the baby shower. The insult, the confrontation, the slap. She didn't rush me, didn't minimize it. When I finished, she asked gently, "Do you have any evidence?" I handed her the USB drive Lila helped me prepare that morning. "Yes." She watched the video carefully, expression neutral but attentive. When it ended, she nodded once. "That's very clear," she said. Relief washed through me. Not triumph, just validation. Someone outside the family had seen it and named it correctly. She typed for several minutes before turning the screen toward me. "Your report is officially filed," she explained. "That means there's now a record of the incident. A record, something permanent, something Victor couldn't rewrite." I signed the statement with steady hands. Walking back to my car afterward, sunlight felt warmer than it had in days. Nothing was solved yet, but for the first time since the slap, I felt like I had moved forward instead of reacting. My phone rang as I started the engine. "Ethan, are you okay?" he asked immediately. "Yes." A pause. "Did you do it?" I did. Silence stretched between us before he exhaled slowly. "He's going to lose his mind." I looked through the windshield at the road ahead. Maybe, I said, but that's not my responsibility anymore. When I arrived home, a new message waited on my phone. From Victor. You've made a huge mistake. A week ago, those words would have terrified me. Now, they only confirmed what I finally understood. His power had never come from strength. It had come from everyone else staying quiet. And I had just taken that away. Victor didn't call that afternoon. That alone told me how angry he was. For as long as I'd known him, silence had never been his strategy. He preferred confrontation. Loud, immediate, overwhelming. He believed pressure solved everything. If someone resisted, he simply pushed harder until they gave in. So when hours passed without a call, I knew he was preparing something else. When I walked into the house, Ethan was already waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed, tension written across his face. He knows you filed the report, he said. I assumed he would. My mom called, Ethan continued carefully. Dad says you're trying to ruin the family. The words landed softly, almost without weight. I didn't ruin anything, I replied. I told the truth. Ethan nodded but didn't look relieved. He looked torn, caught between two versions of loyalty that could no longer exist together. He says you embarrassed him, Ethan added. I let out a slow breath. Embarrassment. That word again. It amazed me how easily harm transformed into humiliation when viewed from Victor's perspective. I set my purse down and sat at the kitchen table. Ethan, I said gently, we need to talk about what happens next. He pulled out the chair across from me. What does that mean? It means this isn't just about your father anymore, I said. It's about us. He frowned slightly. For days, we had been reacting. Hospital visits, messages, threats, explanations. But now the situation had reached something unavoidable. I can't raise our child around someone who thinks violence is acceptable, I said quietly. I can't pretend this didn't happen. Ethan's eyes flickered at the word child. The reality still felt new to him, heavy and undeniable. I'm not asking you to hate him, I continued. I'm asking you to decide where your responsibility starts. He leaned back slowly, absorbing the words. You're asking me to choose, he said. Yes. The room fell silent except for the ticking kitchen clock. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked somewhere down the street. Ordinary sounds, ordinary life, completely disconnected from the decision forming inside our home. I've spent my whole life managing him, Ethan admitted finally, keeping peace, making sure nobody upset him. I know. And if I don't, everything explodes. I met his eyes. It already did. The truth settled heavily between us. Ethan's phone buzzed on the counter. He ignored it this time. What happens if I can't fix this? He asked quietly. I felt my chest tighten, but I answered honestly. Then I protect our child anyway. His head lifted sharply. You'd leave? I didn't want it to sound like a threat. It wasn't. It was reality. I would do whatever keeps our daughter safe, I said softly. The word daughter lingered in the air, real and grounding. Ethan stood suddenly, pacing once across the kitchen before stopping near the window. His breathing grew uneven, like someone wrestling with something deeply rooted. I always told myself he wasn't that bad, he murmured, that everyone exaggerated. I said nothing. Some realizations have to arrive on their own. His phone buzzed again. Victor calling. Ethan stared at the screen, jaw tight. The ringing continued. For years, he would have answered immediately. Today, he hesitated. Then slowly, deliberately, he picked up the phone. My heartbeat quickened. He looked at me once, not asking permission, just gathering strength, and pressed the speaker button. The call connected. Victor's voice burst through the kitchen before Ethan could speak, and I knew, before a single sentence finished, that whatever happened next would permanently change the shape of our family. Victor's voice filled the kitchen instantly. Finally, he snapped. Your mother's been worried sick. When are we putting an end to this ridiculous drama? The volume alone felt familiar. Confident, commanding, certain he still controlled the conversation before it even began. Ethan didn't answer right away. I watched him carefully. His shoulders were tense, but something had changed in his expression. For the first time since I'd known him, he didn't look like a son preparing to apologize. He looked like a man deciding something permanent. Dad, he said evenly, you need to listen. Victor scoffed loudly. No, you need to listen. Your wife has taken this too far. Police reports? Seriously? She embarrassed this family over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. My hands tightened together under the table. Ethan inhaled slowly. It wasn't a misunderstanding. You hit her. A brief silence followed. The first crack in Victor's certainty. I barely touched her, Victor replied quickly. She disrespected me. I reacted. The same word again. Reacted. Ethan's jaw tightened. She went to the hospital. That's dramatic nonsense, Victor snapped. She always exaggerates. I stayed silent, forcing myself not to interrupt. This moment belonged to Ethan. He closed his eyes briefly before speaking again. She's pregnant. The kitchen fell completely still. Even the faint hum of the refrigerator seemed to disappear. 2 seconds passed. 3. Then Victor spoke again, confused rather than concerned. What? Nora is 11 weeks pregnant, Ethan said. You hit a pregnant woman. Another pause followed, longer this time. I waited for shock, for worry, for even a small sign of regret. Instead, Victor exhaled sharply. Well, how was I supposed to know that? The words landed harder than the slap itself. Not is she okay? Not is the baby okay? Just inconvenience. Ethan's expression changed instantly. Whatever fragile hope he'd carried into the conversation disappeared. That's your answer? He asked quietly. Victor's voice grew louder, defensive. You're choosing her over your own father after everything I've done for you? I helped you buy that house. I supported you your entire life. There it was. The transaction again. Love turned into debt. Ethan looked down briefly, then back up, something settling firmly inside him. My child is your blood, he said calmly, and you put your hands on her mother. Victor scoffed. Families argue. People lose their temper. You're blowing this out of proportion. No, Ethan replied, voice steady now. People don't hit each other. Silence stretched across the line. For the first time, Victor sounded uncertain. You're really doing this? He asked. Ethan didn't hesitate. Yes, one word, but it carried years inside it. Victor's tone hardened immediately. If you walk away from me over this woman, don't expect my help again. Ethan glanced toward me briefly, not seeking approval, just grounding himself. We're not asking for it, he said. Another long pause. Then Victor muttered, You'll regret this. Ethan reached forward and ended the call. The sudden quiet rang louder than shouting. Neither of us moved for several seconds. My heart pounded, adrenaline finally beginning to fade. Ethan stared at the phone lying on the table, breathing unevenly. I've never done that before, he whispered. I know. He sat slowly, hands trembling slightly. I kept waiting for him to sound sorry, he admitted. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. He doesn't know how, I said gently. The phone began ringing again almost immediately. Victor. Ethan flipped it face down. He didn't answer. Minutes passed. For the first time since the baby shower, my body relaxed enough for a full breath to escape my chest. Because the biggest battle hadn't been between me and Victor. It had been inside Ethan, and he had finally chosen a side. Sunlight shifted across the kitchen floor as evening approached, warm and quiet. But deep down, I understood something else. Choosing was only the beginning. Now we would have to live with what that choice meant, and rebuild a family that no longer revolved around fear. The house felt quieter after the call, not empty, just different. Like a constant noise I hadn't noticed before had finally stopped. The tension that used to sit invisibly between Ethan and me seemed to loosen, replaced by something fragile, but real, peace. Victor called 4 more times that evening. Ethan didn't answer once. Each missed call felt like another thread snapping, years of habits slowly unraveling. For the first time since I'd known him, Ethan wasn't trying to fix things, smooth things over, or make excuses. He was simply still. We ate dinner together that night, sitting across from each other at the kitchen table. The pasta was overcooked because Ethan forgot to set a timer, and normally he would have apologized repeatedly. Instead, he laughed quietly at himself. It was such a small moment, but it felt enormous. The next morning, Lila texted me. I sent the video to Olivia. My stomach tightened as I read the message. Part of me expected anger, denial, another wave of accusations. Instead, my phone rang 40 minutes later. Olivia, Her voice broke the moment I answered. "I watched it," she said through tears. "I watched it 6 times. Nora, I'm so sorry." I closed my eyes, emotion rising unexpectedly. "I didn't realize," she continued. "I thought everyone was exaggerating, but he looked angry before he even walked toward you." I didn't argue. Some truths hurt enough once they're finally seen. "Thank you for watching it," I said gently. That was enough. 2 days later, Ethan's mother called. Her voice sounded smaller than I'd ever heard it. "I should have said something years ago," she admitted quietly. She didn't apologize directly. I realized she probably didn't know how anymore, but acknowledging the truth at all felt like a lifetime of silence cracking open. After that, things changed slowly. No dramatic confrontations, no final showdown, just distance. Victor stopped calling after a week. The demand for the money disappeared entirely, because legally it had always been a gift, and deep down he knew it. Holidays were no longer automatically held at his house. People stopped orbiting around him. One by one, quietly they stepped away. 6 weeks later, I lay in another ultrasound room, Ethan's hand wrapped tightly around mine. The technician smiled at the screen. "Healthy baby girl," she said. "Everything looks perfect." Relief flooded my chest so suddenly I laughed through tears. Ethan wiped his eyes, shaking his head like he still couldn't believe how close we had come to losing everything. That evening, he assembled the crib in the spare room. It took 4 hours, 2 online tutorials, and language creative enough that I had to hide my smile from the hallway. Tools clattered, instructions crinkled, and Ethan muttered determinedly under his breath. I sat on the couch, one hand resting over my stomach, listening. For the first time in months, our home sounded safe. Not silent, not tense, just real. People think justice is loud, dramatic speeches, revenge, someone losing publicly. But sometimes justice is quieter. Sometimes it's a man choosing to break a pattern he was raised inside. Sometimes it's a woman deciding her child will grow up learning that respect is not negotiable. And sometimes the loudest consequence a person faces is simply being left alone with the truth of who they showed themselves to be. Last night, Ethan tightened the final screw on the crib and stepped back proudly, even though one corner leaned slightly crooked. I walked over and placed his hand on my stomach just as our daughter kicked. He laughed, surprised, overwhelmed, present. If you've ever stayed through a story hoping things would finally turn towards something better, you understand this moment. The quiet kind of ending that feels earned instead of perfect. The slap didn't destroy our family. Silence almost did. And as I watched Ethan adjusting that crooked crib, I realized something simple and powerful. The strongest homes aren't built by the loudest people. They're built by the ones who finally choose kindness over fear and never look back.